more and more into different media pieces as they started to flow out. And in my case, once I deconstructed, I guess you can say, or analyzed a piece by The Guardian, then my channel was blocked. Once it got 500 views, they blocked it worldwide. There's censorship against critical thinking. If you look at any piece of media and you want to analyze it, see how people speak, what they mean, what ideas they're using in the media, you may not be allowed to because they're going to give you a copyright strike on YouTube, for instance. So you may not reach an audience and they may block your thing all over the world. I was just basically exposing them. And we know that journalists don't have much time to study. They have to just look at other journalists, what they're doing. And they're not scholars. And so why people take the news seriously, it's amazing, but they do. So what we have here, in the case of the anthropologist, that takes on the burden of non-misrepresentation. That means you cannot talk about people in a way they don't want you to talk about them. You cannot really twist their words and say things they haven't said, right? And this comes just from the practice of social and cultural anthropology, the ethics of the practice, of description, of ethnography, and our technique, or if you want to condense it, it's called participant observation. And anthropology deals with kind of some of the explanations from the descriptions from our engagement with different communities. In this case, I decided to talk to people in the first hand. As you see, you're going to hear bits from some conversations. And I, thanks to Ido Landucci, attended a couple of conferences in Barcelona where I was invited, because Ido, there has been this thing in the movement that in the very beginning there's a lot of skepticism against academics in general, people with PhDs in particular, because they are the symbol of the kind of brainwash, the person that went through the whole system and made it, so to speak. But that only blocks access for people like me and other people who are academics who are actually not part of that game. They actually, from within, try to resist many issues with academia right now that it's basically crumbling. Because, and as I found, transhumanist funding, this really connects. If any of you heard of Jeffrey Epstein, what he was up to, his ideas, where was his money going? You have a massive apparatus of transhumanists, eugenics, racists that go back to Darwin. You can trace them back to colonialists and slavery and Darwin and so on. And they have a new garb, which is technological, technocratic. And transhumanism as a futuristic idea wants to clamp machines into your brain and make you live forever in space, probably. They love that story. Right? And they think that's really smart, whereas I think it's completely dumb. So they talk about this thing, artificial intelligence. I think it's artificial stupidity, because they're basically writing themselves into the code. And they're not very smart, because they're transhumanists. They believe you can freeze a body and revive it later on, even if it has a bunch of cancers. They really want to hang on. They're materialists to the core. They don't understand spirituality that we see all over the world with different indigenous peoples that anthropologists have studied, including their marginalization. And what we see here is that with globe skeptics, which I call globe skeptics because, as the people from the tour found out, if they go around with the van saying flat earth, they get attacked. It's like a trigger word that has been inscribed through mind programming. A lot of people, they say, flat earthers, it must be stupid. So people have shifted their identity. So it's a new form of relatedness, which is globe skepticism. Even when I talked to Jaron, he was saying, yeah, if I wish I'd changed that in the very beginning, because you didn't see the backlash. And Jaron has been one of the people that have taken the most backlash. And people have lied a lot about things he says in his experiment, for instance, in Behind the Curve. A lot of people get information, what is flat earth moving through behind the curve? And it's a deceptive piece. I picked it apart in an 8-hour series. And as you know, journalists don't have the time even to read. They barely read. They have to read the other news so they can know what to talk about. How will they have time to go through all this information? Hundreds of hours from Ido Landucci and Jaron, and even my work, and Paul on the Plane, for instance, has a Faking Space series that's actually easy to watch because it's condensed. It shows you how they're faking the Himawari satellite. People think that it's actually taking photos of the Earth. So people barely know what they're looking into it. And this is one of the things we see, that when people come out to try and debate flat earthers, they get a whoop. They are schooled all the time, as we saw this with Dave Murphy as well. in a debate that I analyzed. And we see it over and over. Iru just last week talked to people in Argentina in a debate. I thought they were students. That's how unprepared they were. They looked like students. They acted like students that barely knew the information that he was going to talk about. They admitted not to have even looked into what he was going to say before they came to try to debate him. And they just show their ignorance, completely unprepared. And some of them actually was like, yeah, I think we should question stuff. It was really amazing to watch. And at the end, they're geologists. They're actual professionals. And when Iro said something like, we need to look at the history. Who created the system? You know, the Jesuits. And they're like, huh, history? Who needs to know this? Science moves forward. Why did you look back at history? That's the black hole of history that they have, especially in the sciences. They barely know, they don't have the time. They give you this kind of practical idea. You have to memorize everything that's been accumulated. You cannot question your foundations. The foundations are super solid. You know, it's Newton with gravity, then, now Einstein turned it around. The curvature of space and time, it can happen. You can see it. They demonstrate it, right? Have you experienced the curvature of space and time?
Sure.
Anybody? Right? It's second nature. Everybody can feel it. And quantum mechanics and then string theory, all these things supposedly match. No, they don't match. None of it matches. Then you have the multiverse theory. You know, just talk about anything. You're an elk that speaks and flies in a balloon and it puts eggs, and that's your multiverse thing. So that anything goes in astrophysics with math. And I don't know if I'm going to have time because I end up going on for too long and improvising. And I've done that way too much. It's been 20 minutes. And what we see here, I'm just going to connect some of these things here really quickly. They're all connected, but, and I'm just going to draw some lines here. Here, anthropology is very important. This is how it differs from physics and other kinds of things. In physics, you get the little theorem with the math, and you're going to try to apply it, and whatever, you reduce it. In anthropology, our theory comes from actual experience, being there with people, understanding how they put things together. Theories are made up of words and concepts. And very importantly, to the inside of Bourdieu that I'm following, there are these perception categories. Space, for example, the space mythology provides all these perception categories for globers to think according to that, what we call epistemology. And then, okay, that led me into a participant observation of this group that's questioning unquestionables. There's these foundational unquestionables can never be questioned. I just gave you a cursive kind of, Newton and Einstein, it doesn't match. All these things, they don't match. So who is right, who is wrong? They make everything, what we see later on when you look into this is that double think is this thing that's been embedded into the whole mentality of how this works. Things that shouldn't happen at the same time happen at the same time. So there's so many examples in space. One of them being, how can they cross the Van Allen belts in the 60s and then it's so deadly and then they say, oh, we didn't know it was there. We didn't have to think about it, so we could just cross it. That's what the astronaut says. It's fine. So there's that wall. If I didn't know it was there, I could just cross it. It's what they tell me. So essentially, it's got the logic. It goes on and on. So Chris Hadfield says, when you're ready to go on a rocket, you get taken. It's like taken by a dog and thrust around and shot around. And the star, you belong to the sea. He tells this whole dramatic story, and then poof, you're off in the particles of flying, this beautiful non-gravity all of a sudden. After they accelerated from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour to get to whatever escape velocity is, right? That nobody can do that acceleration, you melt. But he can do it. He can tell you, even on TED Talks. But then they show you the Soyuz launch, and what are they doing? They're going like this. The thing is going up, they're laughing, like, that's great. They're not feeling anything. You see that? It's fake, and you can see it's, once the rocket goes up, there's all these things. You're going to see it here, I'm pretty sure. So we know that space is a reality show production. And the people here, they're being marginalized and attacked simply because they're questioning this. And they, for instance, Hero's he is a technician of special effects. He knows how to make animations. He knows how these things work. He actually showed in one of his studies that different launches from different rocket launches from different times sending satellites to space had the exact same video showing the rocket going up live with the same flares, the same things moving the same direction, the same way. It's amazing how space can do. 6 different launches with the exact same video, right? And people are paying up to hundreds of millions of dollars for each launch. It's good. It's good. It's a good scam. It's great. It works. And people love it because it has a lot to do with the science fiction, scientism, dystopian, transhumanist futurism, which is artificial stupidity, how they want to control us with artificial so-called intelligence. And it's all connected to this mockingbird predictive programming medium that we have. That the less they know they're being manipulated, the better it is in that case. And so the mainstream media and the news, they're all linked to this reductionism, scientism, and the evolutionism, which are things that basically use mathematics to reduce reality to a simplistic model. So one of the greatest achievements of the transhumanists, for their own sake, is to turn Darwin, who's sort of an idiot, into a genius. And many other people, like Stephen Hawking and Richard Dawkins, who was on the plane with Jeffrey Epstein. Many times nobody talks about that. Oh, Richard Dawkins is like the god of the atheists, talking about biology and humans being lumbering robots controlled by DNA. It's like his books are science fiction or comedy, at the very least. It's terrible, you can barely read it. But he's idolized because he's taking money from the eugenicist apparatus and transhumanists. That explains it all. It explains a lot to me, at least. And now I don't know what the time is. I'm confused with the time here. I think we have still 15 minutes. Am I correct?
No, 33 minutes. 33 minutes. Up here.
33 minutes.
Oh, I have 33 minutes. 33, 31, 33, 30. So one of the important questions is, how do we know what we know? How do we know that we know what we think we know? And this is one of the things that many of these people, many people in this community have been looking at. So how do you know that there are these satellites in space? How do you really know that it's a ball? You know, can you go around the world and make observations and zoom? You know, they would tell, the first thing they would tell Bill Nye, who's going to show you a curved surface, and say, yeah, this boat's going over the horizon so easy, it goes over the horizon 3 meters away. That sounds more like Bill Clinton. But, and you go and you try to take a look, and it's not. You just bring it back to horizon. So there's some, what's his name, reality something. You guys know? Visible reality, not ODD. It's a new guy. He only films things in the distance with his camera. No, it's not G. Tolan. It's not the guy. G. Tolan also incredible. Observable reality. This guy has a video that shows a boat that starts going in the distance, and really it seems like it floats. It turns into this thing that goes up because of the effects that are going on. So we know that it's not what they told you in very simplistic terms on TV while you're thinking that Bill Nye is some authority or anything. You don't know he's an actor. Or Brian Cox, you think he's smart. You don't know he's an actor. Or you think Neil deGrasse Tyson is super smart. You don't know he has been accused of date raping people. And he's also contradicting himself over and over and over and over again. People have picked that apart. And these are people who are portrayed in the media as geniuses. And as I was saying, anybody portrayed in the media as a genius most likely ain't. That's what we know. So my work has been looking into this conditioning that happens. And how can such a taken for granted dominant cosmology, that is the globe, when you go around and ask people, why do you believe the globe with the ball, be so unquestionable? Because people want to defend it, they want to attack you. You cannot even question it. You have to be attacked, you have to be put on the media and lied about, like Jaron, like a lot of people here, like Bob, who's not here, unfortunately. So how can it be so unknown? Well, you see, when you look into this and you take a step back and see, let's see how the globers interact with the globe skeptics. And what you see is that the globers barely know what they're talking about. They don't know. They just cite from textbooks. So Jaron says all the time, like, why would they even be talking to these guys? They point to a textbook and says, here it is. They don't go to the world. They're not taught how to measure the world and come up with their own observations. It's not what science is all about. It's memorizing formula because it's been turned into mathematics sort of reality. Everything is reduced to their little formulas, and math is supposed to stand for reality. It's exactly what we saw when Dave Murphy debates this guy, Pierre Sorak, who says math is reality. He doesn't say that. He doesn't know. And you talk about density. Dave makes dozens of points. He talks about density, how you can observe density, magnetism, and so on. The guy barely knows how to speak. He couldn't even put sentences together. Something I saw when I was in Shetland as well recently, and somebody tried to challenge me who had a science degree, and I'm a PhD in anthropology. by the way, so I'd been through the training and took even astronomy. And when I started showing some issues, the person couldn't articulate sentences. And then what she did is just she went into the other room, pulled the David Bowie vinyl that has a Space Oddity song, and then she had to dance to that at least 2 or 3 times to kind of feel space. So you know that scientism is this kind of faith and fiction kind of type of storytelling. And here's this is important. I hope the sound is good. What we're trying to do here is that we need to move forward from this. People have proven that there's no curve. Right? There's so many other things to do, and we need to explain to a lot of people how this works. How is it that they're being fooled? They don't really want to look into it. Some people don't care. Some people say it doesn't matter either way. After you show them that there's so many problems with the globe, they'll say, I don't care. I have so many issues I have to deal with life. That's reasonable. But the people who know, I think we need to come together and start doing the hard work, which is pulling off the threads of transhuman eugenics, this apparatus, this parasitical apparatus from academia, figure out all its tentacles, how it spreads, because we know that they're basically rapists. At the very least, if you're gonna use an euphemism for what they're doing, what they do is way more nefarious, right? So what I'd like to show you here is a set of 3 things that people said, Jaren, on the plane, and Iro, that give you perhaps an idea of how we can move forward. What is it that's missing? What is it that we need to teach? What is it that we need to understand so we can tell the people in the world in the future or now that you have to prove things by going into the world and showing them. You can't just go by theories. Theories have to be confirmed through observations, and then you should question them, but everyone, to make sure where they are, where they live, they need to go out and try to make some observations. Right? Because the ball does have a geometry. A lot of people try to avoid this. And then they come out and say that the reason, this is one of the other things how double think works. Like they tell you that the reason you cannot find a curvature and you see too far is that the light is bending with gravity around the ball and making everything look flat. And that's come out. They have to come up with new stuff. And then a scientist contacted me and said, look at the history of refraction. Here are the textbooks on refraction. What's happening is that the light's bending the other way for most of the time. This is 100 years of refraction science that they're looking at, making observations all day, taking temperature and pressure, humidity in the air, and looking how it changes. The light doesn't bend down almost ever. It's very rare it does. So for most of the day, it's bending the other way. So it's like, is that a shot in the foot? But we need to just pay attention here to some of these messages that I selected from some of my research. Okay, first is Jaren.
They should have practical, real-world examples and experiments and tests that these children are doing. If you really lived on this spinning globe, then there would be tests that every child would do. This had to be their biggest fear. Their biggest fear has to be the beginning of the questioning of where people live, because I don't know how you stop it.
So what do you think? Should children be taught how to go around and test the world and see what the world for what it really is? Or should we just tell them it's a ball and have them twist their heads over it? Because what we see in the psychology research that has been done with children who are being told what the world is that they cannot confirm, we see a lot of resistance. And then when they're told it's stupid to think it's not a ball, then they start conforming and they start changing their drawings to try to fit. But all of them, in the very beginning, they say, how can somebody be upside down on the other side of this ball? Is it spinning? And one of the things they find it fascinating is how in the ISS, they have a gravity simulator, right? They're in microgravity, and they have a gravity simulator. How does that gravity simulator work? Right? You know, the ball itself, where supposedly we're on the globe, it's spinning. It has 1,000 miles an hour in the equator. It has to make that big spin. And we know that centrifugal force, when you spin something, you throw a ball, a tennis ball, people have seen this with water, you spin it, the water goes away from the center. So anything that spins pulls things away. The ball doesn't do it because of gravity, they tell you. But how does the gravity simulator works, or the gravity, whatever, anti-supergravity thing they do in the ISS? It's a centrifuge. So look at the twist of the double thing. They simulate gravity with a thing, suppose that spins, so the gravity they simulate is being pulled against with the centrifugal force. It's a gravity. And at the same time, that's the gravity simulator, but at the same time the ball is spinning, so you don't get the centrifugal force. Somehow you get the gravity. They simulate the gravity with the centrifuge. Okay. And let's take a look at what Ido says. And this, I mean, Ido has done some incredible work. I think this stuff needs to be sort of like a catalog. The thing is, like, there's so much stuff he's talked about that to go back and try to find things, it's difficult. This is from a conversation I had with him. So he was showing me directly, and he can do that anytime. He's going to do this tonight. For sure, I don't know what he's going to say today. But let's see what he has to say here. And this is part of how, do children have tests they can do? Do we teach them? We don't. We just tell them. But this is one possible option here.
Fíjate cómo esta sola fuente de luz, de golpe, se empieza a transformar en un círculo.
It's not real. Ido's real voice, by the way.
¿Se ve la realidad? Sí. Eso es anisotropía. Es porque la fuente de luz está cercana y está atravesando capas o un medio que la frena y la disperse. Todo lo que se ve en el cielo nuestro se puede demostrar vía software, vía simulación en laboratorio, combinado con imágenes de la realidad. Y lo que ellos proclaman, no hay laboratorio que lo pueda comprobar.
Sí.
Básicamente.
Well, he's looking at these phenomena, they're clearly visible. He can simulate them in his environment, but he's putting a dome and he's putting a sun that's closer and smaller, and he's doing exactly what you see in nature. Funny. And what they claim with the ball, with the curving water around the ball holding to the center of mass and so on, they cannot prove in a laboratory. We can model these things, we can show that what we're observing matches reality, and there's more to it, because in the flat earth movement you have people that say the sun is so close, it's being rendered between the clouds, and because you can actually observe, there's images that show clouds behind the sun and some clouds in front of the sun, so it looks like the sun is in the middle of the clouds. A lot of people have seen this kind of puzzling phenomenon. People have been wondering about it for a long time, but Ido he modeled this with the actual clouds, with the sun in the proper altitude, and he rendered it from the position of the observer. So you have a plane with the sun really above, going in a straight line. And I don't know if he's going to show this tonight, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering it, but from the perception of the observer, the sun seems to be rendered in between the clouds. Even in Ido simulation, matches reality so well, it's amazing. Okay, so we need to more people to understand how these things are put together. And then we need to have people, well, the problem is because with NASA you're dealing with a production company. They're actors, most of them are actors, and they're fed lines, and we know because they repeat themselves over and over and over and over again. So, I mean, they wouldn't be able to debate either. They wouldn't have the technical knowledge. When the Martian, there was another story, when the Martian came out, this movie, Bolden, the guy from NASA, was crying how beautiful it was, and how good it was, and how perfect it was, and how precise it was. So because NASA is part of Hollywood, is essentially the same thing. But in the Mars landing of Curiosity landing, anybody can see that the actor who's pretending he's the director there, he can barely answer any questions. He doesn't have any questions he can answer. Not even about the compression of the artifacts and they're all celebrating and running around, because that's part of the dramatic storytelling apparatus of the show that people are watching. They get all this expectation. If you follow the Chandrayaan mission, the failed Indian mission, that even Brad Pitt said that he was a JPL, because Brad Pitt's talking to the International Space Station, and he went to the JPL because he did his start in the space movie, so he goes to NASA. And he was a JPL when the Indians are doing their thing, and he said the JPL was actually controlling them. He said JPL is assisting them. Right? And people think, oh, there's all these independent space agencies. They don't understand that McDonald's is in China, and in Japan, it's still McDonald's. Right? It's franchising. It's how it works. It's exactly how it worked with India. They show you CGI cartoons. In the case of India, it's ridiculous. The kind of stuff they're showing. It was like, is this Atari from the 80s? People are like, how is it possible? They should be showing amazing pictures from inside this ship, doing all kinds of stuff, but they just show you this fake stuff. And people believe the kids, they had kids there who had won a space quiz. They were the winners of the trivia from space. So you get a bunch of kids to memorize a bunch of trivia, test them, select the ones that did better. And these kids refused to accept that the mission had failed. And then the Indians went on and on to explain how they had actually succeeded because they managed to do all the 98 steps out of 100. So they did it. They did most of it, the vast majority. So they couldn't have failed, even though the thing never landed, never see any footage, and so on and so forth. It failed. Right, it did fail. But you see just the power of the will to believe and how strong it is, the brainwashing apparatus, and how people love the idea of space. They're never going to go there. They're never going to fly anywhere. And it has a lot to do with pride, nationalist pride. Let's hear Paul for a second.
What we have all been told is going on doesn't reconcile with reality from our perspectives. And so that's why we start questioning. And I think that's the biggest problem. When I first came to this subject of the Earth potentially not being what we are told it is, the first thing that hit my mind was, what about all these pictures we have from space?
Which is what a lot of people say. And that basically is how he starts his journey. He's like, well, let me see these pictures from space. And I was just looking at NASA databases the other day to get some of their Hollywood posters because they're just so playful. They make these Hollywood-looking posters. You should take a look at it. It's kind of ridiculous. But I look into their database, their supposed database, and you try to look into their satellite images and different things. It's basically all CGI. They don't even tell you it's a photograph. They don't tell you. They say it's an image, it's a composite. They have all kinds of things that they say different instruments have to be put together. And it's this really difficult way, and they give you this kind of... And people believe it. It's like science. Science works like that. You get the instruments, they get the measurements, and then they put it together. But it really is reality. And anthropologists are not that naive to believe this because we have science studies anthropology since the 70s. When Bruno Latour did field work inside the Crick's laboratory, I think, looking at DNA, and basically uncovered it as being sort of a ruse, where they're just making stuff up from the complexity that they were looking at, and they try to reduce it all the time. And it's one of the things that science does is reducing everything because they've been caught in this eugenicist, reductionist mathematical paradigm. They think reality is the lack of complexity, that science is reducing everything to some sort of single formula, right? And here, what got me into this, sorry for this, is that these tensions that we see if you're somebody who's trying to honestly represent people, and which we learn from academic research with the human subjects. I did field work in northern Scotland, Shetland, with people, so I was going to be representing people and talking to people. I had over 40 interviews. I lived there for 2 years in the community, and I couldn't just go there as a university student without this control, making sure I say, you know what I'm going to do with this. You got to see what I'm going to do with this. You can have the final word if you don't like what I say. I'm not going to portray you in a way you don't want to be portrayed. Right? It's not what I'm after. Right? But what we see with this movement is that the media shows up particularly to attack people. They don't want to understand them. And it's a kind of discrimination it's just like racism, but it's also racism that's anti-religious, anti-immigrant, all sorts of people who might be different. So in this case, it's a crusade against people who happen to have a different cosmology, because it pokes a hole into the whole science fiction mythology that people chose to love. Right? So we see this pattern of misrepresentation in National Geographic is one of the most extreme. And people have learned to associate National Geographic with accuracy. And one day, actually, at the University of Utah, I made a mistake of bringing up National Geographic to one of our archaeologists, who is this Mesoamerican archaeologist looking at Olmec. archaeology. And I said, oh yeah, I saw the picture in National Geographic. He went on a rant about how National Geographic's trash. We shouldn't even look at it. The way they write this stuff, how it's all just basic propaganda. That was in the States, in university. So we know that media is controlled by a few companies, since Chomsky's book, Herman and Chomsky's book, Manufacturing Consent in 1988, started this exposure of the whole thing. And they go deep into it. You should take a look. But every scholar knows about this book who's looking at anything in politics and history of the world. Can't avoid it. And what we see here is that in this Kool-Aid sort of soda pop that is space, these are some of the things that are also helping to propel it into cultural and larger kind of public consciousness, if you will. Through the media production of space, you have it catches on people's technological cult kind of mentality. They want gadgets, new ones, and, this gadget, that gadget, which kind of seeps into this is how they shot themselves in the foot with the flat Earth. Because we're starting to get these better cameras and everything, and they didn't know that people were going to use them to make observations. So it's kind of a technological revolution, but the media is not really going to tell you this. It's basically people who said, okay, it's a ball, I know it's a ball, I'm going to prove it. Then they don't come back. And it's a story that repeats itself over and over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if you're religious, what is it, the denomination. The people say, okay, I don't care if you're Christian, if you're this or that. You tell me it's not a ball, okay, I'm going to check for myself. You see so many examples of this. For instance, Alex Michael, the Flat Earth Man, in south of Spain where he lives, he's from Brighton, but he lives in south of Spain. What he did is that he started making observations from the coast, and he was seeing Mallorca and Minorca and the islands, the Baleares Islands there, from the coast. And he took the measure and it's like, it's not possible. It shouldn't be there. That's it. It's over. You're not going to convince that guy it's a ball. It's just not going to happen after. He went for himself and proved it's not. Like I was just watching the other night, I was telling Jaron last night, some guy filmed sprites, which are these high elevation electrical events in high altitude, like 100 kilometers, from 400 kilometers away. Right? And that also shows that there should be a curvature there. You shouldn't be able to see all this stuff. But, it's geometry. If you got space, you got video games, and you got films, they can show you space. You have gravity. If you want, latch onto it. You spend weeks and weeks and weeks watching sci-fi, and you love it. You get totally enthralled. And what we see here is all these connections, right? We know this. For flat earthers, it's just something to think about. We know all these things are connected, but the news is a culprit here because it gives legitimacy to what is being invented in the realm of video games and space and NASA. So by coming out in the news with a lot of authority saying the scientists are doing this and that, and we know that they are also misrepresenting science. Sometimes there's so many problems with communication because journalism is not fact-making. There's people writing something. And these are people who have biases, that have connections, that have jobs. It cannot be understood as no anthropologist, no first-year anthropologist is ever going to take the media for granted for what they're saying without considering that they work somewhere and somebody's paying the bills, there's advertisers, everybody talks about this. Pierre Bourdieu talked about this on his book On Television. I was just reading a couple of days ago online. So it's just common knowledge. That's why I'm not afraid to talk about it as an anthropologist. I don't think that people can even say anything about it. It makes perfect sense to be looking into these tensions between cosmologies, of course. And what we see now, what has been exposed, like I said, through Jeffrey Epstein, is the eugenics transhumanist apparatus and how they're buying people, using children for sex and selling them. And these are people who are buying all these scholars in Harvard, like Steven Pinker, is one of these celebrated genius, so-called imbeciles, in my opinion. So you get a lot of these guys, right? They write these big books and they select from, this is kind of how it works. People don't deconstruct textbooks. It's something I've been doing for 15 years more. Like science textbooks, they're put together by somebody who wants you to have certain kinds of facts. Obviously, they're filtering some other things out. And for the scholars, the people that write these big books, so-called, what I call kind of big books, is for different reasons. Because biblion, megon, kakon. It's like a Greek saying a big book is a big piece of crap. It's Kalimakean aesthetics, the idea that you don't need so much to say, you can say something more elegant and in smaller way, or this way. But what you get is that these guys, they have a simplistic idea, so it's like guns, germs, and steel. Like here in Holland, they teach this in school. It's amazing. Like, no anthropologist takes that seriously. It's trash. Jared Diamond has this book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. It's celebrated. It's got a Pulitzer Prize. You do not find an anthropologist that thinks it's worth anything. But that's pushed everywhere. And the way it's put together is that he has a simplistic little reductionistic formula, and it goes around grabbing examples and fits them in. Procrustean bed. Procrustes was this character in mythology who was making people fit his bed. He was stretching them to make them fit his bed, doing violence to them to make them fit. It's kind of what you have with this, because it's good money making. You get a publisher to promote that kind of book as some real serious history, and what it is that it supports this dominant eugenicist colonialist apparatus. So the people who do this kind of work of critiquing the stuff that makes up the dominant mainstream cosmology in academia, they're buried in bubbles within academia now, because it's completely taken over by transhumanist funding. Like, we know this. Now, how does NASA do it? Probably we should end with this, because we have only 8 minutes. And it's how they program the future for us. And here I'd just like to show you what they say about inspiration. Here I just selected some of the logics that they use, and I kind of brought them to us in this way. They talk about inspiration, so they have to repeat that many times. It's all about America's leadership in space. It's this myth of science, exploration, technology. They say that the Apollo program was a revolution. There was a stunning demonstration that it demonstrates there was a fuel to the fire of the American consciousness, right? And and they're going to show now in the future, they're going to go to the moon again to show the power of a unified purpose. And of course, they know that Apollo is all about catching the early young generations with this inspiration idea that makes them work and work and work for the country, right? Makes everybody more productive. Janet's talked about this as a NASA being a jobs program. It makes a lot of sense, right? And they are so good that they want to extend their presence to the farthest corners of the universe, because they touch every aspect of our lives with anything they do. It's part of the myth. Anything NASA does, they're doing for the best of everybody. And I'm not sure you've seen it. They had Nestle did some research in the ISS to research the perfect cappuccino bubble. Because that's very important. That's in the European Space Agency website in the last month or so. Right? She talked, that's a perfect bubble. She said, it's amazing. And this is what they do. This is NASA. Like they draw on these ideas from the collective, sort of the Jungian Freudian sort of archetypes. That's why they get involved in baseball and Hollywood. And what we see here is that you even have this pyramidal kind of staircase thing going on. They have kind of a pyramid going on here. And I mean, some people over there would say, that might be the dome. You see that people have represented is they can tell you. Sometimes people say that they can tell you the truth of what they're showing you. Here, of course, they even have these baseball cards for the astronauts, because they want to promote them as these icons, as idols, as heroes. That in American world, when you go there, when I got there, all my friends had these collectible cards, rookie cards and stuff, like Michael Jordan rookie card. It's worth a lot of money. It's like, what? It's a card? They're all fascinated. Books and books of this stuff that they collect. So, and they know the statistics. Oh, this guy batted this much average. Who cares? Some people, what? Baseball? Anybody outside the States is it's trash. Like, who can watch baseball? It's so boring. I mean, if you say that to an American, they're going to go crazy. Some of them were woken up for just sports. It's baseball. Who's ever going to take the time to play that? It's not that bad. But, okay, 6 minutes to go. We see it here. Well, sorry, here. Yeah, we look at that. So here we see, and then they continue. They give you all these blurbs. This is straight from NASA's website. Why are they doing this? More science. The moon is this treasure chest of science. Apollo samples dramatically changed the view of the solar system. They're taken from Antarctica, right? Anything they find changes dramatically everything. And then they tell you, as they told Iro, this geologist said, she was a teacher. I thought she was a student. I mean, she says, they teach you this today saying it all may completely change tomorrow. So we know science is changing. So that's your solid foundations. Okay, great. So, and then they're just scratching the surface of knowledge by going to the moon. And they can take so much more money from this. It's like, this is just a tiny thing. We spend billions and billions and billions, and we get, we have a new story for the universe, but it's just scratching the surface. So you give us more money, we get another story. And then they're doing everything for everybody. People are starving. There's lots of people marginalized in poverty right now all around the world. But they're taking millions of dollars every day to present this story. And so the moon poles hold water, ice. This is the one that's crazy here. If you look there, if you can see it, it says ice represents power, power represents fuel, and fuel equals science. You can't make that up. It's just kind of like, it's written by marketeers and production company, but ice represents power on the moon, that they think it's there, and it's tons, it's millions of tons they're going to access. It's power, it's fuel, it's science. That's what science is. It's not what science is. It's not really what knowledge is for Aboriginal indigenous people, for all over people all over the world, before this technocratic kind of apparatus comes in, and everything becomes about reducing things, turning them into resources, turning creatures into resources to be managed, turning lands and landscapes and plants into resources to be managed. That is something most indigenous people that still survive the onslaught of this so-called civilization are against. They don't believe animals are resources to be managed. Right? So, and then they continue with this. And I'm not going to bother you with the whole thing because we only have 3 minutes. But they even tell you, this is one, let's finish with this because this is amazing. They say that, and we have to actually read it here, exploration is in the DNA of our species, they say. The desire to discover and inhabit distant world, whether across earthly oceans or vast regions of space, it is critical to the continuation of our species. And this is what we're going to see here. This is transhumanism, perfect transhumanism. Right? Exploration is part of your DNA. The Earth is going to be destroyed anyway, so it's imperative that we move to other planets, and only they can do it. Right? It's critical to the continuation of our species that NASA goes somewhere else. And so we can have, they say, humanity must build a path to Earth-independent existence. It makes you wonder if they care so much about the Earth. Right? They already given up on it. It's going to be destroyed. Right? It's like that young... the teenagers show up on the UN and was crying, we're heading to an extinction event. Everybody's going to, but it's inevitable extinction, but we're going to do something. It's okay, it's inevitable extinction. Let's all just die together, right? But they are telling us this, that they need to be doing this. They need to be going to, and they claim, of course, that their missions to the moon is sustainable. What's sustainable? They're from 1969 to 72, and then never again. And we look at their tent that they say is flying there, right? So what is sustainable about that? And now they say they destroyed. Of course, if people looked into this, they found Don Pettit saying they destroyed the technology from the 60s, and it's a painful process to build it back up. So they have an actor actually saying this, and who sounds kind of like has some problems, cognitive issues, but he's supposedly a genius. It's part of the inversion that we see going back all the way to Darwin, to Kepler, for instance, whose Latin is so terrible, it's barely readable. And people think it's an amazing science fiction story he wrote, this dream, it's called Somnium. And the Latin is just, for somebody like me who knows ancient Latin and poetry from the ancients, compared to the stuff from the 17th century, the supposed geniuses are like, it's like, oh my God, what an idiot. But, I mean, there's nothing to do about that, because if you read Cicero and Ovid and you look back, you look at these guys like, these guys are supposed to be smart. Okay. So here, yeah, of course, you give him, they have all these things. Oh, this is what they do. One of the things Jaron was talking about this the other day. This is an actual NASA expedition here. ISS, they drawing on Star Trek. There they have the Beatles cover. They're doing these posters all the time to promote themselves. And here, let's just finish with what they show you for reality. They want you to believe this is real, and this is where you get a little test to go. We have 30 seconds. Let's take a look at this wonder of science, technology, lifting off from the moon surface, and how its panels, the integrity, the engineering integrity of this amazing piece of technology is guaranteed. Let's take a look. That's the first one. Is the panels flap? Oh, are those panels flapping? Oh, that looks real. Oh, look at that. Oh, what's that? What's that thing that has like a prismatic thing? It looks like strings in different directions. I don't know. It's not. That's how it is on the moon. It's like just like that. And look at that panel. When the lunar lander is taking off, look at that panel. That's how it's supposed to work. It's how it's supposed to work. It flaps in the wind of the moon, vacuous moon wind. Is what we're seeing here. It's amazing. It's so real. And of course, from the Earth with the remote control, if you wonder about that, they're pressing a button at NASA and making sure they do it at the right time so that they can follow this ship going up. Look at that. And you can show it many times. I show this for people who believe the moon landings, which is amazing, and they didn't know what they were looking at. So, yeah, are those panels flapping? So I'll leave you with that because the time is up. And thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the many presentations that we have from great people that I've admired over the years and got to learn and want to know more about. So thank you very much.